Hi, everyone. This is John DiStefano with You Do It. We're hosting tonight's Friday night 3D printing community hangouts. Um, we have our panel here, Joe, Mike, and Richard. We'll be talking about big prints, how to scale up, how to split them up, the methodology used for printing them. It's almost like a continuation of our topic from the last time, 2 weeks ago. And then we expect the subtopic to be filament storage solutions. So if you're interested in learning about that, stay here. So we'll introduce our panel. I'll go from my left, and that'll be JMT.
I've lost my scissors. Hi, I'm Joe Mike. I'm currently taking a lot of photos, doing some documentation. I am a YouTuber. I've got a YouTube channel, Joe Mike Terranella, which is 3D printing stuff. Follow me on Twitter for the most current / where I am all the time. Mojike is where I am there. Yeah, I don't know as far as the breaking up prints, other than maybe a little bit of mesh mixer experience, but filament storage, once we get into that, I can probably lend quite a bit of some insight on that. So, and I'm tired. So.
Well, you got baby.
I do. I've got baby.
All right. Thank you, Joe Mike. Richard?
Hi, I'm Richard Murray. The channel is Zidim. Best way to track down what I'm doing is my website, zidim.com. On Facebook, I'm at 3D Printing for Model Trains. And that is my focus for printing. I do both SLA and FDM printing. And big for me is that size. Not very big, but we'll see what we can do here. I'm into the little stuff with the trains. But just a side note, I'm not seeing us on YouTube.
We're there.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's take a look at chat. So anyone in chat, what's your experience with big prints? I'll go down a list of who we have. So we have John Mackin here. We have Mike. And we have Mitch. Hello, Mitch. And we have Ben. So thanks for joining, guys. All right, so for me, the largest thing that I participated in was a project where we printed the parts for We to Rosie's. So I had the side of participating in the community build, large prints. Gave me some insight. I did an interview with Todd Blatt. He explained a lot about how they manage that and split the prints up using their software. The tools that I heard you can use, I'm using for a project I'm doing, which is a Han Solo in carbonate. The body of Han Solo, I scaled it so it's about 6 feet tall. And I think it's probably like 20-some pieces that are split up into no more than 190 millimeters tall, maybe 150 by 150 on the XY axis. But there's one part I'm having trouble with cutting. That's because I think there's a bug in the model, the way that the DSTL exists. So I may need like a G-Max or something to print that on. So what's your experiences with splitting up large prints?
Well, I don't think I've really split up large prints. I haven't split up prints for the sake of having to split them up because they were too big. However, once I got into multicolor printing, I had to start splitting up single models into multiple STLs in order to facilitate multicolor printing, because each color, for example, on the Palette Plus, each color is actually represented by an individual toolhead, and each toolhead gives its own, basically, STL. So whereas you have one item that is 4 colors, that's actually 4 separate STLs that are just happen to be positioned in a way to allow you to print multiple colors. So what I've been doing for that is followed both Prusa's and Mosaic's how-to guide on splitting up an STL into multiple STLs, which was pretty much going into Mesh Mixer, highlighting the areas that you wanted to remove for a specific color in this instance, and going through the process of basically cutting it out and generating a separate STL from it. And you do that as many times as you need to facilitate the colors that you want to do. Now, something like a larger print, I could see that working for something like that, except I think there's probably better methods out there that I'm just not aware of, but that's really just my only experience with splitting up print. Sorry, I'm not much on this one.
No, it's all good. So I want to see if I can share my screen here. See it's streaming. See if I can do desktop. Does that work? All right. So the way I split this was within Slicer, and it was only because my lack of knowledge of using Mesh Mixer, and I think there was one other tool online, and also Blender. So my lack of knowledge in those areas. I tried Fusion 360 and it was butchering up wherever I did a cut. But it seems to work well in Slicer. But when I split this, I'm getting in there and you can see the way that this model has a bunch of stuff in it here that it just does not like. There's some error in there. It's just causing Slicer to crash. But this is the only piece that I'm having trouble with. Everything else I was able to cut up, no problem. And I'm going to begin printing that in wood fill. And I'll glue everything together probably with CA, but I'm thinking about getting that 3D gloop or 3D goop. What is it? 3D gloop or goop? Using that to glue the pieces together.
I'm a little curious about gloop. I know it's relatively new on the scene, but I've seen a lot of posts about it recently, so it looks like it's starting to kind of make its debut. And are you kidding me? I might have a sandpaper. Man, maker problems, am I right?
Right.
I know I have sandpaper, I just never know where it is.
That's another problem, yep. Oh, wait. Nope, that got my hopes up for no reason. Hopes up and then dashed immediately.
So I'm going to point to chat for a minute, catch up to who's out here. So yeah, Sean joined us, Brian Vines. Hello, Brian and Sean. Whatever Maker joined, and Carl and Paul. Tom joined us also. Hey, Tom. Splits. Okay, so Tom's talking about this. This is good. Tom's saying there's a piece of software, $20 a year. It splits and scales STLs and adds click connectors so that they can snap together. Do you know the name of that software? And Paul says 3D gloop is dichloromethane.
I don't know what that is. Is that super glue?
Sounds dangerous. Super glue is cyanoacrylate, right?
I don't know. I've just been using super glue. I know I'm off camera, and I'm sorry. I'm
It's all good.
scrummaging, which is a cross between scourging and rummaging.
So Chris joined us, Practical Printing Chris. Thank you
No,
for joining.
no. Oh, crap.
Wait, you don't want Chris to join in? Should he leave?
I just dropped a can of bubbly on the floor.
Oh.
And I don't know. My paper towels are all the way over there, so I'm using a shirt.
So, Richard, what's your experience with large prints?
Well, as I say, I rarely do a large print because I'm into small things for the trains. But objects we've done, we sliced in a mesh mixer, and I've been trying to find where I put those files so I can show them off. And I got a feeling that they're on the drive Brenna took with her. You know, the big thing was getting the model sliced so it actually matched our print surface here. We've got, I think it was a 4-foot long sword that we had to cut down. And the biggest thing wasn't actually slicing it apart. It was the next step of, after the print, putting it back together. Now, this software that was mentioned on there by Filament Frenzy, it'd be great to find out what that is, because to have the ability to build right into the print, the joining, without manually going through each piece and trying to line up plugs, what have you. That would be it. Now, on the other side, I do have the multi-material unit on order. And as Joe Mike was mentioning there, breaking things up for multicolored is going to be the learning curve.
Tom shared the link with me. This is what we discussed 2 weeks ago, I think. I swear we talked about this, whether it was a month ago or 2 weeks ago. Luban? Does that sound familiar?
Make it big.
Let me share my screen.
What'd you say?
It's called Luban, Luban.
Not familiar with that one.
Okay, so Tom's clarifying it. It's called Make It Big by Luban. Yeah, I see the title right here, so let me share my screen. All right, so this is... Why didn't it switch? I was like, my stream deck's not working. There we go. So let me zoom in here. All right, so the only thing I don't like about this is somebody's experienced a virus warning when downloading Luban, just because it wasn't registered as a Microsoft developer. All right, so this is something I wanted to do, and I too experienced this, and that's why I didn't proceed. But other people told me about it, so thank you, Tom, for sharing that. This is something I'm definitely going to try. I should do it during the live stream. That would be good. And the price, okay, so we're saying it's 20. There we go. Oh, okay, you can buy it outright, $120. Cool. So with the license period upgrades and bug fixes are free. That's neat. So I wonder if I do that enough that it would work. Yeah, thanks for sharing that link there.
Oh, it looks like an interesting bit of software.
Yeah, I do. I definitely do want to try that Because like I said, this one piece is really causing me trouble. What I do is I want to cut it in half this way, vertically, and then both of those pieces will be rotated, so that'll be flat. That way we'll get some more of the detail as it's printing it. You get better detail that way of the piece.
Now, how big is that going to be when you're done?
So Han Solo's body will be about 6 feet tall.
So it is fully life-size.
Yeah. So
Okay.
somebody said he was like 5'11". So that's a good it's a good representation. And then the bed that he's going to sit on for the carbonate part, that's all going to be done in MDF and plywood with some reinforcing 2x3s. And then all the side pieces where they had all the indicators and everything, that's all going to be 3D printed. And I'm going to have displays in there for the LEDs and all that. But I'm going to do it in stages. I'll worry about getting Han Solo printed out first because to me that's the most difficult piece. And if I accomplish that, then I'll mount him on a bed. And then I'll at least be able to leave it standing here, leaning against the back wall as part of my... Because I want you to see it when you're looking back here. So let me switch my screen here. To switch to streaming. Yeah, so back here over my shoulder, this is where I want it to stand. So I'm going to have a couple cameras mounted. So you'll see my face cam for the talking head, but then you'll see another camera that'll be a wide angle lens that'll capture that whole area right there. So from about here over to, I don't know if I'm off camera, but somewhere around here, you'll catch part of this wall here. And all this is going to be done with the Death Star control room theme. So I want those panels with the slots in them with the white light behind it that you see in the Death Star. So it's a lot of work, but
sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what inspired me to do that is I wanted to do it for a long time because I'm a Star Wars nerd, right? As I know many of us are, but I attended Video Marketing World and I was talking to Luria Petrucci of Geeks and Geeks Life. So what her whole thing is making the backdrop. Well, if you know Daryl Eves, she helped work on Daryl Eves' backdrop. And several other creators' backdrops. So I'm going to Vid Summit next week and going to talk more about live streaming and setting up your backdrop and everything. You see some people who use like the faux brick backdrop that you just buy for like $20 on Amazon and you just tack it up to the wall. But I want to go like hardcore. I want this to be my signature thing. Have it all lit up with LEDs and everything. So what do you have going on for other projects?
I've been learning how to use ZBrush, and ZBrush did a major upgrade. It's now ZBrush Core 2018. So slowly getting into its headspace. I am finding it to be the hardest software I've ever dealt with to get into its headspace. Instead of having objects, you have tools, for example. So, the terminology is different. The layout's different. For example, I don't know if the menu bar will actually show up here, but the file, which you normally expect to find on the far left-hand side, and when you're been around the software for a long time, here, if I take this down, then you can see Here it is. It's in the middle. For what, 30 years? It's been over on the left-hand side. You know, even in the DOS world, we had a lot of software. It's always been over there. So it's a minor thing, but it's just one of those things that tosses you off in a different direction, and you have to work at it. But I am quite happy with some of the stuff that I have been able to do so far. See if I have project here, and this I'm just learning how to do textures on a brick floor. So
you created that brick floor?
Yes.
Wow.
And what this is actually is from a company called Printable Scenery. They make all sorts of gaming things. Here's a gate that you get from their system. But these you can't sell. They're for your own use for gaming. It's great. But what they have is the template for all the pieces. That's open source. And you can go on to Thingiverse or over to Printable Scenery, download it, and then put your own textures on top. And those you can sell. And we have a very active gaming community here. So I was looking to build things for them. Now, two problems I ran up with is I keep thinking SLA. I keep forgetting about limitations of FDM printing. So very little of that texture actually showed up. See if I can.
Unless you print it large, right?
Yeah, well, you need to print it to the scale. So there's a print. Most of that stuff did not appear, which is fine. If I did an SLA print, it would be there. But the other problem I'm working with right now, let me see that didn't focus, is exporting from ZBrush, the scales got changed. And so I have to learn how ZBrush, how to scale it. So when things come out, the reason for using the template is this is an open lock system, they call it. So any gaming piece that uses open lock, you can connect to it. And that's the whole idea, is we can build things and add on to it. Maybe have a few of the high-end commercial elements added on to it, but you want it all to interconnect. And I've been playing it around, but I'm still off by about 1 millimeter and trying to fine-tune that. So that's part of the learning process of getting into this software. I started this in Fusion 360, and Fusion 360 and meshes don't like working together, as far as I can tell. So at least for the 3D printing world, but it's all a learning curve. But there's another fellow from Weta Workshops that's put out some gaming pieces, and it's incredible. And I'll find the link to that just to see the work that is done, because you'd think Weta Workshops, Lord of the Rings, that sort of thing, the talent's down there. But he's turning, this is his own project, worked on for 18 months up to the video shot. Adam Savage from Tested did a shoot of it, and the stuff is to drool over. So I'll get that link up. But it's all for gaming. But I'd love to see this also for model trains. Same sort of idea of being able to hook components together and build different structures.
I built my CNC specifically to make things for model railroading. Never made one thing for model railroading on my CNC. Now that I'm in 3D printing, I can see how my 3D printer would help, but it's N scale. So I'd really need SLA. But I don't want to deal with all the resin and stuff. I'm not ready for that part of my life. Let me stop that conversation for a moment, and let's go to Pooch, and then Matt. So go ahead, Pooch, for your intro.
All right. Greetings, everybody. You hear me okay? Okay. I am Pooch. I'm known as Repcord on the interwebs, all over Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, you name it. I love 3D printing. I've been into it for quite a while, and I have a little brand and a little product line of stuff, but all of my stuff is for makers, by makers, and happy to be here.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, hey everybody, I'm Matt from How I Do It. Yeah, I've actually got some big prints in the works as well, one of which that I can't really say too much about yet. But I just printed a baby Groot head and part of his arm, only part of it because it failed, but there's the the part. So I got to reprint from here up to the hand. That's printed, basically maxed out on the CR10S, about 1.5 feet tall, something like that, whatever the max Z height is. I have that printed and primed and partially sanded. I got to finish painting it, and then that's going to end up going in my garden. But I know Chris Pileski said he's going to try to jump on tonight as well. He's printing some pretty big stuff, more along the scale of what I want to print, but I'm still working out the details for that stuff. So that's pretty much me and what I'm up to right now for big prints.
All right, thanks, Matt. So Chris is he's been posting a lot on Twitter, has he?
He has, yeah. For what I think the last week, no, actually it goes back before Maker Faire. He was printing parts of a really big Moai, the Moai statues, Easter Island statues. And he's actually doing something kind of neat. He's doing some testing with, hopefully he can jump on, he can give better details than this, but he's testing graphite, dry graphite lubricant spray on the prints to make them more heat resistant, because I'm pretty sure he's printing those out of just PLA. But then they're going to go outside in his yard, in his garden, and he lives about a half hour to an hour south of me. I mean, we have 100-degree summers, so they're going to have some heat and sun beating on them. So he's doing that as some testing with the graphite spray to see what kind of heat resistant properties it gives the print. But he's printing up, it's big. I think he said 3 feet tall when it's all said and done. And then he started, oh man, he started something else that he's printing big too. That I think is like 12 pieces or something like that. One of the low poly models. I forget which one though.
Yeah, I definitely want to see the effects of graphite on that. Is it graphite spray that he's using, or is it just graphite powder?
It's graphite spray. So like motor shops and stuff like that. Actually, I think the brand he's using is either WD-40 or PB Blast.
Yeah, I have the PB Blaster stuff.
Yeah, it's an aerosol can that actually it goes on slightly damp, so to speak, just from the accelerant to blow it out of the can. But it's graphite powder in a can, essentially. So it goes on wet and quickly dries. I mean, like by the time it hits it, it pretty much dried. And then he's painting over top of that. He said one of the things that we were talking about, and he was talking about on Twitter too, is the concern of whether the paint would adhere to the graphite. And so far from his tests, it sounds like it's working really well. So he's gonna coat the part in graphite, or has coated them, and then he's gonna paint them after that. So we'll see. Brian Stoffel, I think, is that right, Joe Mike? Is that the guy that's 3D printed rockets from Murph?
Oh yeah, I think that's right.
He's the one who said about using graphite spray. I guess that's what he uses on his parts of his rocket that actually take some serious heat from the engines. Most people, when it comes to 3D printing and rockets, are just printing the nose cone. Like I know Neary's prints and sells nose cones, but they're as far away from the heat as you can get unless things go catastrophically wrong. But Brian he coats everything in graphite, and he says that that'll make PLA resist the temperatures of the engines firing on some pretty big rockets. I mean, he's not doing little, like, craft store rockets and stuff, kit rockets that kids do. He's printing rockets that are 5 to 6 feet tall. So, I mean, they've got some serious engines to them for PLA to handle it.
Let me take this time to remind everyone to mute Alan, their mic. They're not actively talking.
Tom Filament Frenzy just said that the rocket guy, the actual motors are 3D printed in PLA. So not just the body of the rocket, but what's holding the rocket fuel. I don't know if he's using the sugar fuel or solid rocket fuel or what he's doing. I'm guessing that's probably what he's using.
Sugar fuel.
Yeah,
Ethanol?
sugar and stump remover makes rocket.
Oh, that stuff.
Solid rocket fuel.
10-4, good buddy.
I actually have stump remover down here because I had some plans of just printing rockets that would probably totally burn up when I launch them, but just for the sake of doing it. So yeah, he's printing.
I kind of like this this framing with the lights. It's very artistic. I had to switch to my cell phone because I tripped over my MacBook. So
Joe Mike's testing his scene setup.
Well, right. I mean, I've got this camera right in the middle because I'm documenting Repcord's stupid box for him.
It's not stupid. You're stupid.
Your mom's stupid. Sorry.
That's how we speak in Jersey. All right.
That's pretty much me and Pooch's relationship at the moment.
So I heard with the rep box that it's a kegerator too.
Oh, that's all Nick.
It's not actually refrigerating, but it does have a tap. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, if you guys in the chat haven't seen, Repcord's YouTube channel has a new video for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
I really have no room to talk, Pooch.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Pooch's latest video, go check that out. It's the first of many uses besides 3D printing of the rep box.
That's right.
So we have Dave Randolph is slowly joining us. He'll announce his presence when he's here, and then we'll get his intro.
That's not Dave. That doesn't look like Dave.
It's not David?
That's not David.
Wow, man. Clean.
Dave pulled off his beard, but he didn't have a good enough excuse like getting dog poop in it.
Ugh.
Yeah. I usually shave it off about this time of year. I don't know why.
I would say that's opposite of most people. Going into winter, we all usually let it grow out. When I had a goatee, I always had a beard in the winter.
But maybe it's like that, like adaptation thing. Like if you're bald-faced during wintertime, since it's wintertime, your body's like, oh gosh, I need to grow something for my face, so it grows back like super thick and fast. So maybe he's onto something.
Maybe he just doesn't want icicles hanging from it.
Yeah, that's a good point, but I just don't want to end up like Chris Polinsky.
Oh, shots fired.
Shots fired. That'll make him join the video.
All right, Dave, let's get your intro, brother.
All right. Hey, David Randolph over from Printed Solid. And, yeah, just crazy about 3D printing. That's why I come in here, and I print all sorts of fun stuff. And I got my big project, that I've been working on for about 2 years now.
BB-8.
The BB-8. He's on number 4, I think. Yeah, that's the 4th one I've done of him so far. And I'm working on starting up the number 5.
He's the 4th one you've done? You built four BB-8s?
I've gone through 4 BB-8 iterations so far.
Is the goal for him to be fully functional?
Yes. Part of the BB-8 group is that we do have fully functional BB-8s. I printed a bunch for friends and stuff like that that have the time to sit down and do the mechanical and electrical and all the paint and all the pretty stuff like that. And I'm jealous when they're done. But there's a good couple dozen of life-size BB-8s rolling around out there.
Dave will be done his revision by the time kids 20 years down the road go, who's BB-8?
I'll be done with
Find that
BB-8
this BB-8 is fully functional, fully operational BB-8.
I'll be done when it's actually a live product that's already out on the street, and I'll be like, finally.
Yeah, right.
Knowing my luck.
The
All
chat
right, so-
wants you to grow your beard back, Dave.
Yeah, that's just Carl. He doesn't count.
So
Yeah, Carl.
give us some updates in the industry from your viewpoint there, Dave.
Oh man, everything's changing. No, there's a lot going on in the industry. We're seeing a lot of companies changing stuff around lately. It's really kind of interesting. We're seeing, the higher up executives. I think it's finally becoming payday for a lot of our companies. So I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year, if we don't hear companies consolidating, selling off, or whatever. I would not be surprised by that at all right now. So, and we'll have that, and there's probably like 2 or 3 more printers that we should expect by the end of the year by different companies, realistically. So there's a lot going on, and the only sad thing is that there's not a lot going on in filaments right now. Everyone's just it blows my mind because filaments is really the untouched part of it, and that's kind of interesting.
So then Prusament didn't blow your hair back, huh?
Prusament didn't blow my hair back. That Prusament, in my opinion, is going to be an honest competitor to like the Amazon Basics, the cheaper filaments and stuff like that. But I don't think it's going to be the game changer everybody thinks it is. Because don't forget that, he's going to put that on Amazon and he's going to be out of stock and everyone will be on a waiting list for 6 months. He just doesn't have enough bandwidth to supply Amazon with what they want. I think we saw the video. He's got what, three lines. He's got 1 line up running right now, but he's building 2 more. So he's got 3 lines total running over there.
Okay, the last video I saw of it was 5 lines running and 2 more in production.
Oh, was it 2? Okay, 2 productions and 5 lines total.
No, it's 5 running today.
Okay.
And 2 more coming online down the road. I don't know when.
Okay, so 7 total. That's not bad. That's not bad.
Like
most companies are getting up there 10, 20 lines if they want to, really compete these days.
Well, he has to feed his own organization. And what is that, like 3.5 tons a month or something like that?
That wouldn't be surprised. So you figure 4 tons worth of stuff. I bet you that's probably two lines alone right there.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a massive operation.
So kudos at him for spending up a lot.
What was that on Protopasta?
How many lines do they have?
3, I believe, with a 4th that they use on and off experimentally. I believe. I'm not sure if Keith's not in the chat, is he? It wasn't. It's not a huge operation they've got there, but they've got a lot of automation.
Really surprising because for the most part, I know there have been sometimes, but it always seems like Protopasta is available. Like that's one that I don't typically see a lot where you can't get something.
Well, Protopasta is a specialty filament, so it's not
Yeah, it's not the bottom dollar. Yeah,
you're probably doing 20 rolls of PLA to every 1 roll of Protopasta.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The comparison between Prusament, Print Solid Daily, and Protopasta, there is no comparison there as far as the amount of lines and the availability of it. But as we were talking about that, you got me thinking about that. I didn't think Protopasta had that many, but yeah.
most of the specialty companies usually are like running 1, maybe 2 lines. So, I mean, that's the thing. They're like 1, maybe 2 lines at most. And that's because they're trying to make a filament that's not $25 or $20 or $10 or things like that.
With Printed Solid having their daily PLA, are you guys looking at potentially expanding your line?
We're actually looking at expanding our line. We're going to have a few more options available in that and keep that going. Mainly because we think that for us, we really want to make sure we have availability on our filaments. That's our #1 problem. We want to make sure that anything that we release, people should be able to come to our site and order it and not expect to wait 3 months for it.
Right.
So we're trying to make sure that however we get that set up, that's what it's going to take. And it's a pain in the butt to drive, and get all the filament companies in line and producing the materials like we want.
Yeah.
We might be getting to the point where we just spin up our own line and do it here.
Oh, that would be neat. I live close enough to you, so that would be really neat. Chris in the chat, Practical Printing mentioned Filament One has their new Pro line of filament as well, which I honestly haven't even gotten a chance to look and see what the details were with that. I avoided the internet while you guys were all at Maker Faire.
It's kind of funny because there's a lot of good and bad in the regular PLA. But I think as soon as you get into that Pro line, it's kind of everyone else's Pro and then ColorFab's Pro. Those are the 2 differences. Those are about the only ones that I get a considerable difference once I get into the PLA Pro or PLA Plus filaments these days.
Now I have my first spool of PLA Pro coming from filaments.ca. But my previous order from them had an issue the day the filament arrived, and it was their Econofill. I also got an email that they had a recall on it. They had a problem with the supplier of the initial beads, and the filament turned out to be very stringy. So they blew that out. That's where I have, I think 7 kilograms of the real stringy stuff since I blew it out. It'll work for the game pieces. I wouldn't print anything else with it, but for the game pieces, it's there. But, kudos to them because they did say, we had a problem. Here it is. This is what we resolved. If you bought it, this is what we'll do for you. And they're quite open about it. I've had some other filaments arrive from other suppliers quite some while ago, though. And the stuff was crap, and they didn't care.
Filament Frisbee brings up the rebranding going on with Filament. There's an interesting backstory to a lot of that, is that you'd be surprised how few filament lines there are in the world. So the amount of companies that literally just put their name on the same box you get from another place or what they call white labeling is insane out there. If you look at even Amazon's basic filament, I've been hesitant because I've gotten a couple rolls of it in. I think they're doing the China route where they just use whatever they bounce it around between whatever houses can extrude it that day.
Yeah, the best price and who can get the material there to keep it in stock.
Amazon Filament is actually produced by a known company.
Come on, Swatchmaster. We know you already leaked it.
And since the person who informed me of any of that is no longer in, well, I don't want to get people in trouble, but I can say that.
Text it to me and I'll say it.
Just look back through his tweets. It's not hidden that far.
Basically, so the Amazon filament is the current Inland filament. So Inland changed manufacturers, and when they changed manufacturers, they changed to a brand, which I'm not going to say the brand name. I won't go that far. But Inland, which is rebranded, and Amazon, which is rebranded, are both the same manufacturer, made on the same lines, just different Pantones.
Interesting, because I ran into problems with my Amazon Basic filaments that I got. They were dramatically different.
Yep.
But that was early days. I did it very early on.
I actually use my my new inland profiles with the Amazon filament. It works perfectly.
So do you print it hot then?
I print it hot, 215 and 210.
Yep.
That's
on
actually
the color
compared to what I've had to print it, but yeah. That actually
with a hardened nozzle, you need to hop it up to about 220.
Yeah. Yeah, I have between the Sapphire and hardened nozzles, I have had no luck with inland, and fortunately Printed Solid started up the daily PLA just in time for inland to screw it up. So
But that's my little chunk of gossip, and I'll return you to your regular scheduled program now.
That's a good one. I thought they were bouncing it line to line because that's pretty common over there.
It is, but they, to my knowledge, they wanted to keep their filament fairly, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Consistent, yeah. So they are using a single supplier, but the supplier who is supplying inland and Amazon and a couple of other brands, which I won't mention because they are NDA. I mean, Chris knows all this too. So I mean, it's just they're a Chinese company. They're well known in our community, and I'll just leave it at that.
You know, the thing with Amazon, you know, after working with them or around them for the last couple of years, it's interesting, is like they obviously have the benefit of a lot of analytics of what sells, what has good ratings and stuff like that, and they're just doing what Amazon's always done, the classic, if there's enough margin, if there's enough money to be made in something that they've been collecting data on for years and years and years, they'll release an Amazon Basics and start to eat other people's lunch. So it's, if you're rebranding, you know, like to me that's a writing on the wall. Like I'm getting out of that space because, you know, I can't compete. The other thing that's interesting is that when you're dealing with China suppliers, everyone and their uncle owns a factory over in China. But as David was saying, you'd be surprised at how few there actually are. So there's a lot of misrepresentation about actual companies, and there's a lot of reselling going on, you know, different levels and stuff there. Now at an Amazon level, I would hope they actually have boots on the ground and, you know, a better understanding of what they're dealing with. But it doesn't surprise me anytime China's involved that things can change, and you know, if Amazon finds they can make more money elsewhere, it wouldn't surprise me if they pivot off too. But you know, let's see.
Well, I mean, we got to remember that Amazon isn't just, you know, this big nameless corporation that has one buyer for everything. I mean, all their departments have individual buyers. So for, you know, the 3D printing stuff and for Amazon Basics in general, you know, for each section of Amazon Basics, for like cabling and for home goods, they all have separate buyers. So you go along with that, and if the buyer feels like that the price to benefit ratio is still good enough, I don't see Amazon just cutting out their current supplier just to save a couple of cents here and there. Now, if it was something along the lines of someone came in and undercut them severely, and it was a good filament, at least to the, you know, quality of their current filament, at that point I could see them making a change. But knowing how Amazon Basics has been in the past, they haven't made a change to the supplier unless there was something either wrong with their current supplier or they found a better supplier and could keep it at the same price.
Yeah, and really, I mean, you also got to consider, why would you want to screw up your own brand? Like, Printed Solid's got the daily PLA, Amazon's got Amazon Basic PLA, or filament.
Yeah. Why would you want to pull an inland?
Yeah, if that was the route you were gonna go, yeah, if that was the route you were gonna go, pick something else. Like, call it, I don't know, call it the Etsy filament and sell it through Amazon, but don't say it's actually Amazon owned, because you know what I mean. It's got their name on it, so I would hope that means they care more about the quality and the consistency of it.
Well, I'll put this out there because Amazon, I mean, if you bought any of their basic stuff, like their electronics and stuff like that, it's usually not the high quality, it's the reasonable quality. It's
right.
You know, it's not meant for the high end. So it's kind of common practice in that buyer market to move around. That's one of the reasons why I'm happy as a individual, not happy as a business, that Prusa is doing his filament. Is because those are people that actually know 3D printing and will make sure they keep a consistent quality. I don't think he's going to keep a good content on his color spectrum, but I think he's going to do great on his materials and his tolerances and his spooling.
Was very invested in it, obviously, given that he uses so much of it.
You know, so I'm gonna give him kudos on that and say, you know, damn it for selling cheap filament and trying to screw me over, but you know, kudos for you know, at least a filament I think people are going to be able to at least repeatably buy and use the same way each time.
Yeah.
So I'll give him kudos on that one, definitely.
Oh, I wanted to ask, Dave, you've gone through enough filament, and now with you guys having the daily PLA, and Pooch, maybe you can attest to this too with your filament. So we do hear all the time, you know, like compare the spool to a known brand, and if it's a similar spool, that pretty much gives away who makes it. How true does that hold? With you guys having experience with having your own lines of filament?
Most manufacturers that I've worked with, they buy their spools from other companies. So what you end up with is that company might, you know, in the middle just decide to change out their spools. So you'll see a lot of companies that share the same spools, but it's even on different lines because these machines don't require a specific spool put on the machine to get it going. So they can kind of put anything on it. The only people out there that I know of that are making their spools in-house, truly like making from scratch, is the Color Pad people and Protopasta.
Yeah. I was always curious about that because we all a lot of times we all get filament and you look at the spool and you're like, oh, that looks like my Inland, or that looks like my eSun, or whatever.
It's an indicator, but I don't think it's an absolute.
Right.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I source my spools totally separately. In fact, the first supplier I had actually did make some of theirs in-house, but I didn't like it, and I was trying to differentiate by using the clear spools at the time and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yours is a good example, Pooch. I don't think I've seen your spool anywhere. Now, granted, they are a different size than most of what we're all used to as a standard 1 kilogram spool or 750, but I don't think I've ever seen any other filament that came close to your spools. I'm not saying there isn't one out there, but
there's a few, but it's not common. But you know, the thing about
robotics is about the only one that I've seen that comes close.
The thing, and the reason I originally picked those was back in the day when MakerBot was doing a lot more. I wanted something that would actually fit inside their Gen 5 housing, and so I spent some time shopping that around. The thing to know about spools is that most of the spools that we see were not developed with filament in mind. You know, that they come from you know, welding wire and other industries, and so we kind of wound up with them in 3D printing because they were readily available for a lot of these other technologies and stuff. And so now we're starting to see, I think, a little bit more development with purpose built. So like Prusa's doing his kind of, you know, new thing that's using a lot less plastic. Obviously see like a Protopasta using cardboard spools. Probably see some more cardboard springing up here and there coming up.
But he's not making his in-house, is he? I thought he designed it, but I don't think he was actually injection molding.
I don't know that he's making it in-house, but I believe it was purposefully designed with the intent of 3D printing filament on it.
Yeah, I think it's his design.
Yeah. which is cool, and I like to see, because there's a lot of weight and waste in the spool. You know, there's a lot of talk around the master spool initiative and stuff like that, and I think there's definitely room for improvement on, you know, how we move it. But it's a tried and true industry. It's readily available, you know, based on its usage elsewhere. So a lot of these spools are just repurposed from other applications, and a lot of suppliers just use the same ones.
It's cheap to buy them in bulk. I've seen them bought in pallets and then shipped around.
And there's a lot, believe me, if you've ever paid for pallets of spools, there's a lot of wasted space, and the amount of bulk, you know, that it takes for the amount of spools that you land. It's a frustrating process.
Oh, it kills me. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen it.
One of the things Prusa is pushing with their filament line is being able to log on to their site, put in the code that came with your filament, and you can see the manufacturing tolerances that came out. How big a role is that going to play?
For me personally, it's not really a selling point. In going on 3 years now of 3D printing, I've had one spool of filament that dropped sizes on me from a reputable company. That reputable company next dayed me an entire roll, even though I was 3/4 of the way through the one that dropped sizes. So for me, when I first got into it, everybody's, oh, you got to measure your filament for every spool you put in the printer, and you got to measure it so many feet or yards or meters or whatever into the spool and average that out and enter that to your slicer. That crap just confuses people. I've never had any major problems from anything except for that one spool, and it went from 1.75 down to like 1.55 in the middle of the spool, and the extruder just couldn't feed it. To me, you know, it's neat. For somebody who does like to see data, I think it's more of a gimmick than anything to me directly.
Yeah, I agree. It's a marketing feel-good piece, and you know, the same way that I think a lot of people are paranoid that their filament is just soaking up water. You know, that the tolerance issue is probably another thing. And we're marketing to geeks here, right? And so it's like these are the things that if we're going to point at one thing or the other, we're grabbing for things to point at. But how big is the problem actually? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've had some junky spool. I've run a lot of filament too, but I would agree that this day and age, I think it's less of a problem as the manufacturing gets better, and you know.
Yeah. I mean, 0.2, 0.3 is pretty much standard nowadays for, you know, tolerances.
Yeah, that's what Tom's saying in the chat.
I mean, I give kudos to Prusa for coming up with the idea of putting that information online. That data, I mean, is extremely easy to, you know, acquire from their diameter sensors, which everyone runs the same sensor setup. I mean, it's a serial output. It's extremely easy to require. It's extremely easy to put into a fiber machine to engrave on the spool. And I mean, the only thing that just wasn't done before Prusa was the software. So, I mean, I give him kudos for coming up with the idea of the software. But my only problem is what's going to happen 5 years from now when he's got, you know, 20 million spools he's trying to track online, all that micro data. He's going to be paying out the butt for Amazon cloud services.
That sounds like a perfect application for the blockchain. It's a blockchain. You know, it's interesting because I think it's something that is significant enough that you're going to start to see people copying it. You'll see that, you know, a lot of the Chinese manufacturers are saying, hey, great, we can slap a graph on ours too. Whether or not anybody's actually going to be able to verify that or even want to go to the trouble, I doubt it. But if that becomes the standard, how hard is it to slap the label on there?
What my honest thought when I saw that was, okay, that's all well and good until the first person gets a spool and they look up their data and it went out of spec. Like, if it were for some reason, some fluke that spool happened to get a kink in it before it went through the sensor, like I don't know. It's just like, why, to an extent, why open yourself up to that potential? Because if you're going to put the data there, the potential is there that somebody goes, "Oh, well, it's 0.4."
Some nerd's gonna verify it.
What's going to be worse is that there's going to be a person online that goes, I got a spool today and it's out of tolerance. It doesn't match the data, and they have no proof to back it up. And it'll start this huge internet rumor thread going off about, you know, that it's fake data, because there's no way for us to verify if it's true or fake, you know, outside of Pruse's factory. So that rumor mill is going to start.
Yep.
And
Somebody
on Reddit.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody on Reddit's going to run one through their own laser mic and then compare the graph.
I was waiting to see it on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, somebody will do it on Reddit, and we'll find out that they're from a competitive company.
You know, Tom brought up an interesting thing, Filament Frenzy, about the new Prusa spools and the way they're designed. I don't know if you've looked at them closely, but it does. I haven't actually landed an actual spool of this, but you can see that there's bolting or fastening like through the flanges, and I imagine they're using some kind of wrapped core, and he's saying cardboard. And that makes perfect sense, and I feel like the reason that we're going to start to see more of this too is that if you can flat pack your spools and flanges and all that stuff, you can get a lot more in a box than if you've got that barrel already in place. So I'm sure that design is intentional, Tom.
So I'm going to say this, and this is just because Tom made me think of it when he said about the cardboard core. They could market their spools as 100% recycled cardboard if they wanted to. Every time a spool of toilet paper is empty, you take the cardboard roll, slap it in the plastic, and wrap the filament. Sorry.
Unfortunately, the diameter on a bog roll is not quite thick enough. But yeah.
It's Prusa. He's making the printer. He can just resize the spool holder.
No, you don't want it to wrap that tight, man. There's a reason that 2 inches seems to be the de facto.
I even think
that was just a thought that popped in my mind.
What was that, Dave?
I even think that's too tight for some filament.
Yeah,
that
you're probably right.
Is really tight.
Yeah.
So, but it's going to be interesting to see. And I love your idea of the flat pack core, because if they can go with cardboard cores, I mean, and make it work, imagine how much shipping that'll save to the factory.
A lot, yeah.
Well, because you can flat pack the sides, and then you can literally ship the tubes separately. And that would just be a huge time saver. And then just cut the tubing down at the factory. That's easy enough.
Yeah. I still don't like tubing just in general. Anything. You're shipping a lot of air, And it's like, I really want to see somebody come out. Have you seen those laser cut spools, those little sample spools that are like actually like flat and they can kind of wind and key? I love that. It's not practical, I think, for a mass manufacturing. But there's gotta be, maybe it's like a paper roll solution. Maybe it's something where it's like you throw a couple bolts in there and you just run a little paper through it before you start winding filament around it. I mean, I think there's any number of ways where it can be done.
If you have an uneven or uncircular core,
as
soon as you start the spinning, it's going to make your filament flop all over the place. You'll never get a clean spool.
No, you're totally right. And then you're gonna waste a ton of money on whatever fasteners and stuff too. It's just not, you're not saving anything.
Cardboard's brilliant. I mean, cardboard's brilliant because there's so many local places that do cardboard tubing across the world, and then you just get whatever place is cheapest to do your sides. That's a brilliant concept. I mean, that makes it really easy to move manufacturing almost anywhere in the world.
That's a good point. Found a local source. Interesting.
Local source of cardboard. I mean, there's like 15 cardboard factories around me alone.
It's just what if you've ever gotten into product, it's just it makes your head spin. You're like, oh yeah, great, just another step in the sourcing supply chain to worry about, right? I got all my flanges, but now I'm out of cardboard. I got all my cardboard, no flanges.
And I'm out of tape today, and I got to get foam pieces.
But
I have 14 different types of tape I carry in my store just for packing and shipping and all our products. It's insane.
Hope your office manager is paid well.
And we have a whole floor in our building just for box sizes. Insane. So yes, packaging is even worse as far as design. If we're talking about briefly about packaging, I'll tell you, the humor thing is me and Matt have had about 6 meetings in the last month going over not the design of the box, but the actual box itself for a roll of filament we're trying to launch. So we've had 6 meetings with multiple manufacturers just to go, all right, what's your box? What's its rating? What's the tonality? Yeah, the whole 9 yards. How are you stamping it? And that's, we haven't even gotten to artwork.
That's just the
cardboard
holds in the box. That's it.
Man.
So rating, rating is like the drop test and all that, or compression.
Edge crush test and then total weight test.
Just
they have
send
different sizes for that.
Just send it through UPS across the state. You'll get a good idea of its strength.
Actually, if you check in with FedEx and UPS, they both, if you're going to launch a product, they both offer a service to help you with your insurance. So if I launched a product, I send it to FedEx, pay them some money, they'll ship it to like 30 different hubs, and then they'll inspect it and check it and make sure. And if it survives that, then they insure your product on every shipment.
Really?
Same is true for FedEx.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
So companies go through all of that, and that tends to slow down launch on a lot of people, because that takes several months just to pass those tests for FedEx and UPS.
Yeah, packaging is no joke, man. There's a lot that goes into just that, and it's frustrating too when you think about how much that matters. You know, when you're trying to brand and market, and then how quickly people just be like, "Yep, great, gone." You know, like, and there's money being spent. I think about what percentage of the cost of, you know, the filament is just going into the packaging, the spool, the label, the box, the bag, the desiccant, all this stuff that's just not, you know, looked at.
I mean, think about it this way. Let's say an average spool of filament probably has about $9 in box and shipping costs to your door.
Sad.
The rest of that money is in the filament. So when you buy that $11 roll of filament, you're buying $2 worth of plastic.
Wow.
Master spool.
Yeah, has Master Spool been beat to death yet? Or yeah, because it's like, I love the idea as a supplier, as a practical user of it. I just don't. I don't think people are voting enough with their dollar, at least not so far.
Well, if filament companies priced master spools, they'd have to get to the point to where they could produce master spools at a reasonable price. But if they could get to the point of where their master spool rolls were significantly cheaper than their regular filament, and by doing so, I think you'd have to like cut down on, you know, the grandeur of the product as far as the marketing is concerned. So maybe just a plain brown box with my filament in a bag, because I mean it's play to your audience. So obviously I'm using a master spool, so I either want to A, be a little better on the environment, or B, I want to pay less for the filament. Right. I still want to use their filament, but I just don't want to pay, you know, all the overhead that goes into packaging it in a nice, fancy, beautiful package on a nice, beautiful spool. You know, I just want the filament.
Well, yeah, I mean, even what we just said though is like, okay, so you're cutting the spool out, but you're still, you know, there's still the bag.
Everything else applies.
There's still the box. There's yeah. So it's like that's just a small component of the cost. So there's really, they're not passing a lot of that savings on to you, because it's still
it's minimal savings.
But think about the cost that does go into the packaging though. So like, for example,
master spool still got to be packaged.
It does. I'm not saying it doesn't. I mean, you can't just like lob plastic in the mailbox with a stamp on it. But I mean, it's kind of the same thing that a lot of companies who use a screen printed cardboard box face. I mean, you've got the box price itself, and then you've also got the printing price. Now, granted, the printing price isn't, you know, quite as much as the box price in a lot of cases, but a brown paper box is still going to be cheaper than sending off a bunch of boxes or special ordering boxes that are screen printed. Am I not correct in that, Dave?
I would actually argue on that, and here's why. It goes, well, to answer your question, a brown cardboard box, sure, we could genericize that, but it's marginal. It's, I mean, it's not even 1% of the total cost for the screen print. But on the master spool, the argument I would make is that it requires a thicker, more robust box to ship than filament on a spool, because a master spool is a little more delicate in its cryovac bag than any spool of filament is.
So what if you took the cost of the box? Could you possibly get like the wraparound foam, the shipping foam, for cheaper, throw it into a bag, and then ship it in a bag?
You could do that with a spool, but you couldn't do that with the master spool, because think about the master spool, how it's cryovac together. There's no protection on the sides. Even if you put foam on it, it's going to get thrown and tossed around. It's got nothing to bump it. So you're going to get that impact even through a little bit of foam. You're going to get that impact and that jostling of the spool itself and shipment. That really does need to be in a box. Where a spool, if I wrap that in foam, it would survive pretty well in shipping.
Tony Ryan has a good point in the chat, and this was the one place that master spool would actually become interesting to me. Not that it's going to make a huge difference, but the one thing it has going for it, if manufacturers would adopt it, is, okay, you lost the weight of the spool. You lost the cost of the spool. Instead of lowering the price, charge the same price for it, and whatever the weight of the spools you use are, add that much more filament to it, that much more weight to the 1 kilogram. Not that I mean, the spools don't weigh that much extra, but that would be the only place that I could see. Now, yes, you are getting a savings because you're getting a little bit more filament.
I think right now the current master spool trend is 750 grams.
And yeah, see, there's the other flip side of it. I like buying 1 kilogram spools. I want my extra 250 grams. No offense.
Well, Dave's no, it's fine. Dave's comment still applies though. It's like you said, if you're giving them more spool and less protection, they're gonna have to jack up the packaging to protect it, so
right.
they're not losing.
Oh yeah, I wasn't arguing.
I mean, if these were easy problems to solve, we would be seeing a packaging. I have a minor in packaging, and there's entire billion-dollar industries around just the most effective way to protect and package things with the least amount of material and all that stuff too. So these are not by any stretch easy problems to solve.
Yeah. You can minor in packaging?
Yeah, I have a psychology minor and I have a minor in packaging, and my degree is in industrial technology. Though I up until recently.
A minor in packaging?
Yeah.
Don't laugh. Packaging is a surprisingly intense science.
Oh no, I don't disagree at all. It's just so many things now after getting 2 rep boxes in the mail are coming into focus.
Hey, I didn't say I was good at it or I was up to speed on the latest. Yeah, there's a reason it wasn't my major.
You get to design you a really expensive box.
There are watching Jimmy DiStefano on YouTube. I mean, he went to an art school and they taught package design there. That's what Jimmy DiStefano did, in addition to making woodworking and metalworking and stuff. He did package design for toys. So yeah, I believe Pooch. It's not a false education.
Now, just for an example here, this is my box from the shipment from filaments.ca. So that was 1 spool, and this is it wasn't spool. This is just the filament. The box size to a standard shipment is what? Not even an inch smaller, 1/4 of an inch on each side. But I like the idea. It's a little bit less, but you're not saving much space. But when you're ordering, my last order is 7 or 8 kilograms, just going on to the master spools as needed. It's easy enough to do. And at the end of the day, I don't have another 8 or 10 spools sitting in the house. I just have the ones that are in use.
See, my ultimate solution to this whole problem, Because I have a problem with master spool. For every time somebody forgets to zip tie or their side comes off of it and it comes unraveled and they waste a whole spool, that's just 20 normal spools they threw out the window. My solution is we just need to re-standardize everything to 1.5 kilogram spools. That reduces everything across the board.
Okay, explain.
So if we get everything to 1.5 kilogram spools, we're going to get people that order almost half as much, as well as the packaging on a 1.5 kilogram spool is not going to be twice as much. So it's going to reduce packaging. It's going to reduce shipping. It's going to everything the master spool claims as its advantage, I think, could be solved with just changing spool sizes to 1.5 kilograms. That's my master solution to everything.
Okay, I have a question to that then. That makes sense. Being that Printed Solid has their line of filament, how hard is that change to make?
That means that we'd have to source all new spools, all new boxes. So it's not a hard change, but the thing is that it can't be just one company that does it. It has to be all companies simultaneously, because a 1.5 kilogram spool won't fit on the Prusa. It won't fit on the Lulzbots. It won't fit on the Ultimakers by default. So we got to come up with a new, 1.5, kilogram size that's a 9-inch spool that's 2.5 inches deep, something like that.
Mike in the chat, NLTMW, said if he puts a 1.5 kilogram spool on a Monoprice Select Mini, it's going to do a wheelie.
But I mean, that's the problem. I mean, we kind of have to all the printer companies and all the filament companies kind of have to at the same time be willing to do that.
Repbox would have to, or Repcord would have to redo the Repbox. I'm sure A-Pyre Designs would like that.
Well, all you got to do for that is just buy another Repbox to put underneath or on top of the first one, so that you could have 1.5 spools and 1 spool's compatibility.
There you go.
You'd look like Jet Fox, where these old joke, you may be a redneck when you have a smaller TV on top, or a functional TV on top of a broken TV kind of thing. You have a smaller box on top of a big box. Just have a stack of boxes, right? Yeah, it's one of the things I was going to say was part of the reason I did smaller spools originally was my whole concept for differentiation was I'm going to take smaller amounts of filament but give you a variety of color, right, and put them into a bundle. And while that seems well and great, and that there's savings in packaging when you do that, because now I can take, say, 4 or 8 spools and put them into one big box instead of having to have the individual boxes. I ran into some interesting stuff with Amazon around, I went into their, say, oversized category in terms of what they were considering, too large. And when you look at freight costs and how they do dimensional weight and stuff like that, there's a lot of logic in the choices of packaging size that goes into what is going to be most cost-effective to ship as well. So there's a lot of other variables that are going into it outside of just what you as the end consumer is receiving and why it costs what it costs.
It's amazing how much of the product's cost is not actually the product. It's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom asked, I don't know if he's still with us, but if he is, he asked an interesting question that I've been kind of pondering. And he asked me if I could change one thing about the current hobbyist filament market, what would it be and why? This is a great question, and I'd be curious to hear what everybody else's answers are. Or I think the first thing that popped into my mind, Tom, was as both a consumer and a supplier. I mentioned before, I hate the inefficiency of our delivery mechanism for the filament. That it's wound around a spool, a circular thing. As is very inefficient to package based on its shape. And so, in a perfect world, and I realize we don't there's reasons that this doesn't exist yet. But I would love to see if we were going to stay with FDM. If we're talking about FDM, I'm going to use a couple qualifiers here. I've always said it would be really neat if somebody could crack the nut around a pellet printer where we can just have bags of the stuff, because that is way more efficient, to package and potentially less waste and, all of this other stuff. That said, obviously there's a reason it's not done, and we all don't have part daddies sitting out in our garages with giant shop vacs pumping, stuff. But obviously the part daddy model doesn't necessarily scale down to the desktop. But if I were able to change that, if I were doing the moonshot and saying like the limitations were plastic, yeah, I would love to see pellet or some means of personal extruding of filament in a effective manner that went directly to, extrude what you need only to print, and you could master batch and you could blend colors, and that'd be fantastic. I suspect that's completely impractical for what you were asking, but I like to shoot for the moon.
I've heard that from Protopasta, and what always is in the back of my mind is the delivery system used for color laser printers. If instead of putting toner, you're actually putting down a filament of plastic that it's compatible with that. It can be put in just like a toner. But then we have fine detail, you have full color range, and if it can be based off of that technology, color laser printing has been around for quite some time. So it's sort of adapting that technology. It'd be wonderful if that could work, but we got a ways to go yet.
Yeah, and it seems to me that the resin lends itself better to like a lot of the things that we're thinking here, if they can, figure out how to make it less expensive, less toxic, and all these other things. But given that now you've got additional weight and other considerations, liquids are certainly heavy and costly to ship a lot of the time too. So I don't know. Does anybody else want to take a shot at that question?
Well, just to talk about the resin issue, then you have a delivery problem, because if you want to get into color work with that, you want to be able to deliver a mix of resins and apply it to an area. It'd be wonderful if it could be done rather than having to deal with a vat of resin sitting there, and if you want a different color, you have to change your vat.
Well, that's a paradigm I think we're familiar with, though, when you think about inkjet modeling and stuff like that. Now, I don't know that applies necessarily to the chemical makeup of a resin, but we already kind of have an idea of the technology it would take to, say, blend colors to get different materials and stuff like that. But I don't know enough about how UV resin works to say if that's even feasible.
Well, I think the problem you get into is that it's that when you're doing these UV resin prints, you actually have to fill that up with the material, so you can't really keep changing the color each layer.
Right, you're not jetting in the same way. Yeah, you're
right.
Absolutely right.
So that's the problem with that resin thing.
But I mean, that's based on our current paradigm that we're accustomed to. That's not to say that there couldn't be some new technology at some point where we're just jetting the resin we need and curing instantaneously.
Yeah. Exactly. It would be a whole new type of printer. It would be a whole new SLA process.
Let's get on that, Dave.
I'm on it.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you, just so I can answer the question. The thing that I kind of wish, is weird as it sounds, I kind of want to put the reverse on a little bit, because I think FDM is going to be here for a while longer. But I kind of want to put the reverse brakes on, because I kind of like 285 filament over 175.
Ooh, fighting words.
I know they're fighting words. I want it back, and here's why. No one has ever been able to make an honest argument on why 175 is better than 285 or 285 is better than 175. The only argument I can make for it is that 285 is a little easier to handle, in my opinion, putting it onto your printers and moving it around and storing it and all that stuff. I just find it easier to work with.
Well, probably with the 285, you probably have less chance of it snapping too.
Less chance snapping, less snags and tangles.
Yeah.
I would say it does seem to it can't handle as sharp a curve if you're depending on how you're routing stuff into your printer. So maybe if you have a compact feed mechanism, there could be an argument for 175 in that.
Yeah, you gotta make tight turns 175.
Yeah.
What I haven't ever gotten to print with 285. David, I know you have. Anybody else in the panel that has?
Just on the Ultimaker.
Moisture content or absorption. Is it better or worse? Not now. I'm going to ask this question because that's a hotly debated thing with filament. And yes, all filament absorbs moisture to an extent. I've never directly, and mine's stored. You can see there's spools back there in the basement, dampest place in my house. I've never actually had a moisture problem with PLA. I have with nylon, obviously. But with 285 to 1.75, how is that?
Arguably, I would say you're going to be in the same boat.
Okay.
Unless you have it all unspooled, just sitting around in a big loose pile.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Is your thinking like there's more surface area or something of the filament that's I mean, it'd be so negligible in my opinion.
There's more room for error. When you go up to bigger filament, the room for tolerance is bigger. That's why you can have 2.85 or 3 millimeter filament.
There's a different reason for that, but I see where you're going with that. And it's not so much that there's room for error. Think about it this way. The thickness of the filament itself, you could make an argument that thicker filament can't absorb moisture as fast as thinner filament can. You can make that argument, but then you have to realize this is all on a spool. So technically, it's the same mass of plastic. And it's a marginal difference in the thickness when you really get down to it as far as moisture is concerned. So maybe there's an hour between the in the middle of the night that you could use the 285 and not the 175. But that window of opportunity is like an hour.
Yeah. So it was just a curiosity. Something popped in my head as you were saying about why not to, if that was a factor. Because I don't have.
I think we're missing like a glaring. Maybe it's not, but to me it's, one of those things that kind of shouts out and goes, oh well, yeah. As far as 2.85 versus 1.75 melt speed, so 2.85 filament being in thicker diameter requires a little bit more heat on it for a longer duration of time than 1.75. So when it comes to printing very quickly, I don't see that being as good as 1.75 as far as speed is concerned. For me, I think that's pretty much the only disadvantage that 2.85 has over 1.75 is the fact that it takes longer technically to melt. Now, you take into account that you can throw a block like a volcano or something larger on there, and you kind of get the pre-melting process going, and you can push a little bit more plastic out faster. You do the same thing with a 1.75 filament, and you still can do it even faster. So I think that as far as 1.75, I just want to say more companies are going to it because it's easier to handle. Personally, I found it easier to handle than the 2.85. The 2.85 felt like I was working with I don't even know what kind of wire. It like a very stiff, hard to manipulate wire, whereas 1.75 feels like a thinner wire, easier to manipulate, easier to work with generally. I don't know, but
that's the advantage of the 285 is that it is a little stiffer and harder to work with. Or at least that's my thought.
In some cases, yeah, I would say that's definitely an advantage from certain point of view. So, but like for example, like Pooch was talking about with the angles and stuff like that. So on this palette, let's say they made a palette that was 2.85 compatible. Now, right now I've got a reasonably straight path between the palette and the printer and with the scroll wheel in between. But if I was running 2.85, there is a certain bend on it that 2.85 would not be able to navigate without causing a great deal of friction on the PTFE tube and possibly causing the splice to break.
And their preload area, the 285 would have an issue with their preload area. It's a little tight on the pallet too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages, but it's one of those, if we could rewind the button and push 285 on everything would have been designed to be compatible with 285. I just find it easier to store on a shelf and work with, personally.
So, I mean, why did most manufacturers go 175? Or let's talk about printer manufacturers. So why did printer manufacturers all of a sudden decide, hey, let's run 1.75 versus 2.85? Does anyone know the catalyst for that?
I'd say two reasons, and this is strictly opinion. RepRap started with Weed Whacker trimmer line, which is 0.065 inches, which is basically 1.75. Most of our printers in the hobby, what's out there, desktop printers, most people in their home are buying a RepRap based printer or something that was born from RepRap. So that's one of the big kickers for why 1.75 is a standard. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, David, the 2.85 3mm is a commercial standard. Your larger printers are using that, and I think there's a 6mm, if I'm not mistaken, as well, or something like that. Those were your commercial industrial standards, which is what Ultimaker took after, what Lulzbot took after. Granted, Lulzbot's more out of the RepRap design, or RepRap era. The other reason is, Joe Mike, you said it yourself, 1.75 is easier to print with because it requires less hardware, which means our cheaper printers aren't going to be able to push 2.85 or 3mm because now they got to put slightly more expensive parts into them. You've got to engineer them a little bit differently because your extruder's got to be stronger. Chris, Practical Printing, pointed that out. I didn't even think about it. To move 2.85 and push it through the hot end, it's got to have a stronger torque stepper motor to do it. So that's my thoughts.
Well, here's an interesting little, this is my rumor mill backstory that I've heard from everybody and that I've pieced together over the years. So 3mm was, in the early days of RepRap, there was two arguments. One was the 1.75 and it was the 3mm. The reason why the 3mm was picked was because in the early days, you had ABS welding rods, which you can still get today because people actually weld with ABS plastic, and that's in a true 3mm diameter. And that's what and some of the early RepRap people were doing that for their printers. Then you had the 175 guys that got all their stuff sourced from the Weed Whacker guys, the trimmer guys. So you kind of had RepRappers not deciding in the early days. 285.
A divided community. What?
I know, right? But 285 came from the pro people, the 3D Systems, the Stratasys, those guys, because they were pushing stuff down Bowden tubing, and Bowden tubing was 3mm internally,
and they needed something a little bit smaller.
Would get stuck in there, so they had to make a smaller size for themselves, just to come up with 285.
They adjusted it down for tolerances then.
That's right.
Interesting.
So that's why we have three sizes, and then the Ultimakers and the Lulzbot and most of the other, large filament sizes. That's why 285 and 3mm gets almost interchangeability, but there's an actual reason why there's.
Okay, the camera switched to Pooch as his eyes widened from the rep box on camera. I saw that, Pooch.
Well, I was just laughing at the irony of Joe Mike telling everybody to mute their mics earlier.
Oh, shut up! I'm doing.
And then, I know, but I was just saying, like I did it, and you yelled at me.
How many rep boxes do you have in your house, Pooch?
I am doing something kind for Pooch, and here he goes.
And it's very appreciated. It's very appreciated. And okay.
Pooch, how many rep boxes do you have currently set up in your house?
Assembled?
Yes.
Not intended to go to customers.
Yes.
I've got 7 in various states of prototype.
I'm just laughing because I see at least 2 hanging on the wall behind you, and you're assembling another one, and I don't think you have that many printers.
No, I don't. But like I said, a lot of these are in various states of versioning.
I'm just picking.
Are you assembling a rep box right now, too, Pooch?
Actually, I am disassembling a part. We're testing a change for manufacturing here. Going to a 3D printed part over some laser cut stuff.
Which one?
The seal bars.
Oh, that's what I'm messing with right now.
Yeah.
I would say that would be a good choice considering the amount of cleanup I have to do on those seal bars.
Yep.
It's already a known problem. Fix it now. I like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm letting you guys do all that sort of stuff. I'll wait another month before I order mine.
Can we,
come on.
Where I'm gonna put it.
can we
bad
talk
idea.
about the rep box?
Sure.
Yeah.
All
right, so-
Richard, come on.
So I don't know.
You go first.
I don't know what a rep box is, how it works. Tell us all what it is,
Don't?
how it works.
Oh, are you pretending?
Oh man, is this paid promotion?
Come on, man, work with me.
I mean, I
Work
didn't.
with
Yeah.
me. Wait, what's this rep box everybody's talking about?
It's a filament storage solution, John. Basically, it was born of the pains that Travis and I both had around all the filament that we had laying around and disorganized and gathering dust, like literal dust. And so we just kind of started spitballing back and forth, different designs, different things we were doing. You know, Travis showed me an early sketch of a box that he had made. I showed him my rail system that I have over top of my printers, and what I was doing for the actual spool feeder, which was kind of a variant of the tush style rollers. If you've ever seen those on Thingiverse with the bearings that sit flat and the spool just runs on the flange with this bearing. And so we kind of started mixing and matching best of breed and different solutions for different things. So originally Travis is thinking, I just want something I can put my filament in. And I was like, well, hey, it'd be great if it could do that, but then print from it at the same time. And so the box came to being as a way to store and then easily go from storage to print without having to do a lot of manipulation. So I don't know about you guys, but traditionally if you have 1 or 2 printers, you'll have a spool holder either mounted on it or you have an external spool holder or something like that, and you'll swap and unload and stuff like that. When you've got multiple printers and you're trying to print parts for production and stuff like that, it's any amount of time and efficiency saved, better. So if I can just spool one color out and wind it up and pull another one down, that was great. So what's funny is we came up with this box without really thinking about the multi-material revolution that is starting to become, apparent. Multi-material revolution being a trademark term by Joe Mike.
Thank you for attributing that one to me.
Whether or not you believe it's a revolution, I don't know. But a lot of the attention has certainly come since more around having a more efficient means of keeping multiple spools together. So in the case of an MMU, where you've got 5 filaments, I don't know if you've seen Prusa's spool holder solution for the original and what they were doing when they were showing off the early variants of the MMU2, but it was a kludge, man. There was just stuff everywhere. They had spool over here, spool over here, spool under the desk, and so we started kind of tailoring the design around some of that as well. And so it's kind of been this interesting evolution of both a storage solution and a spool holder solution kind of blended into one. And then the other piece is that everybody's worried about humidity attacking their filament, and so we came up with the sealing kit as well as an enhancement. And so we're trying to really create a modular box that has a lighting kit, a 3mm kit, a sealing kit. There's kind of an ecosystem around it, and they're designed to easily be either freestanding or hung on the wall. Like I like versatile design. I like things that can can serve multiple purposes, and so that's kind of where we're at. And apparently other people like the idea too, because we started pre-selling them at Earth, and we've been selling it ever since. So yeah, I don't know. Questions, concerns?
Have you figured
Well, the
out
one thing you missed is
thing
things
yet?
to protect against. My cat.
Oh, cats. The cat. Yes, defending against rogue pets, of course.
That's one of the key ones for mine. Just the other day, just got through my defenses and took off a little bit more filament, came in, and there's no filament going in, just on the floor. So
start unwinding it, huh?
Yeah.
I could see a cat wanting to crawl into here too. I've teased Travis about his cats crawling into his.
Hey.
So since you're here, Rep Cord.
Yes.
And we're doing a little marketing for you. Defend yours against that.
Woo! The Polybox. Yeah. So now that's not that's a different one than the one that I've seen at Matter Hackers, where it's got the integrated dehydrator unit, right?
Integrated dehydrator by them means they put desiccant packets in there.
Yeah, which is what we're doing as well. Okay, so it's not the active, it's not the print dry, it's not like the print dry solution.
Right, which is the food dehydrator.
Right. So that one's by Polymaker?
Yes.
What's the price point on that? I haven't seen that one actually. I haven't.
$70 for a 2-spool holder.
Okay. And how is it mounted and stuff? I mean, what's your feeling on it?
It's $70 for a box.
Mm-hmm.
But here I'll give you the 10-cent tour of it.
Okay.
So they do have a cute little display which actually tells you the humidity inside.
Okay.
It's adorable. But they have the box and desiccant package stored in the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not doing the flange rollers. What they did instead is they did
the rod.
They did rod rollers.
Yeah.
Which the spool roller that I make for printed solid actually has that rod holder concept as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting. It's not bad because it's a clear top. But it's kind of, in my opinion, it's a little weird on the on changing out spools inside of it. It's kind of a process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because
how many spools does it hold, Dave?
The lid that goes over it makes a great seal, but the Bowden tubes are built into it. So you lift it off, and then you have the spool, and you have to kind of pull it out and wind it before you put it back together. So, it's not great, but it's not bad.
How many?
So let me tell you what. So first of all, I've looked at all kinds of different roller solutions and stuff. And the reason that we went to the flange model as opposed to say using the rod roller that you'll see is that we wanted. So as we were talking about earlier, spools are many different widths and sizes and whatnot, right? So we wanted something that was versatile. And we developed this track system so that you could print with any number of width spools, and you could load in and out independently of the other spools actually spinning and rolling and whatnot. With that rod setup, like you'll never have more than 2 spools that can go in that space up to a maximum width, right? Whereas we can actually take advantage of the entire width of our box by manipulating where the rollers sit, and therefore allowing 500 gram spools, 750s. There's different widths of kilos. Like I don't know if you've seen like the Prusa kilos tend to be a little bit wider than some of the ones that we've seen, and so we said about that, and then the same idea. We wanted some variance in terms of loading without disrupting things. So when you open the lid, you can load in and out without having to worry about the Bowden tube getting in your way, as with that design that Polymaker has.
So
I'll show you this so we can talk about that too for you. That's my spool roller that we sell in our store.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did, it's still the full roller. It's actually a 3D printed roller with
Mhm.
608 bearings inside of it.
Right.
And what I did is I designed this system forward and backwards. So if it's all the way out, it will still work with the giant spools.
I like that. Yeah.
And if you move one end, it'll work just fine with the 8 and 9 inch spools. And if you move both in, it'll work just fine with the Tallman and the little baby spools.
Yeah, that's a nice design, Dave. I like that.
It's a cute one. Not enclosed. But
but I love versatility, man. I like where your head's at with that.
I have a question
Oh.
there, Pooch.
it's open source, so you're welcome to steal that for 2.0 rep box.
You know, one of the funny things that I've been there's a lot of, you know, I joke a lot that I'm like, oh man, I can't imagine building a printer because we're just trying to make a box here. But there's a lot of parts that are in this silly box. And when I look at, you know, Dave's design for his bearings there, and I'm like, the first thing that jumped out at me is like, wow, he's got some heavy duty hardware, you know, going through this. So like a 608 is what is it, an 8mm internal on the bearing?
8mm 516.
Yeah, and then so anyway, one of the things that I wanted to set out to do to try to ease, you know, assembly and stuff like that was make it so that all my hardware was required one hex key to use, right? So I settled on 3mm M3s and specifically button heads, which actually use a 2mm hex. Yeah. And that was an interesting choice, because when you're pairing that with something as wide as 8mm, now you've got to develop a bushing for that. And I was sure there was some off-the-shelf solution. I mean, these are easily injection molded things, but nobody was doing that I found yet a 3mm to an 8mm bushing specifically for the purpose of holding a bearing, because typically when you're using these bearings for a skate or something like that, you need a much stiffer axle and whatnot. But the price of your hardware goes up substantially when you increase the diameter of it and whatnot too. So for something like this, where it's not really, the weight isn't really a concern, and we're trying to keep that, we ended up just 3D printing a whole crap ton of these little bushings. Ultimately, if we sell enough of these, we're going to start moving toward injection molding parts and stuff like that. But the really nice thing about being part of the, you know, makerspace and having these great tools like laser cutters and 3D printers is you can iterate and actually sell at a certain level at a rather low cost of entry, right? And so a lot of our design decisions are kind of made around that we don't want to spend $5,000 on tooling and molds and all that stuff right now, because I want to prove that the market's there first.
Hey, Pooch.
Yep.
So you mentioned a lighting kit for this box. Have you guys figured that one out yet?
Have we figured it out yet? No, we're not selling one yet. We've been kicking ideas around. That's all I'm going to say right now. You want to share some ideas?
Well, I've got ideas if you want to talk offline. I have a really easy solution for you, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
I had, Dave, you were asking about the difference, not difference, but comparisons of or defending a rep box versus like the poly box or whatever they call it. This is my defense to the poly box. This is actually the desiccant that's been in here. You can see the blue dots. I have the indicator desiccant. I bought a 1 pound bag of indicator desiccant and then a 5 pound bag of just clear desiccant. I mixed them all in a bucket, put a weather seal on. This is a $11 tub from Walmart and maybe $10 or $15 worth of desiccant that most of it's still in the bag. These have been in here since I bought them back in June. The desiccant's been in the box for almost a year because I built the box a year ago. And I have yet to actually dry the desiccant that's in here. It's just a weather-tight box. So, like, what Pooch is doing as the distribution system for multiple printers, multi-material versus the poly box, This is why I wouldn't pay $80 for a poly box. And I realize you guys sell them and everything, and I don't mean to belittle them. You don't want to put something together, here you go. You can buy that. This is like $30 worth of crap.
The poly box is for the people that don't want to make that box you just showed.
And that design, Matt, has been around, and it's a great design. I actually had one myself, and I've had ones that were like 5-gallon buckets and all kinds of stuff. And you got, first of all, if you're going to try to sell stuff to this community, one, you have to have thick skin, because I got to tell you, people are always going to approach you and be like, well, I could just make one. And I say, like, great, you should make one. And I'm not offended at all if people do. But, you know, there's a lot of people out there that don't want to spend the time or don't necessarily have the tools to do it. And I feel like I can do it a little bit better. And I feel like I've kind of proven that point by the fact that, you know, we've sold enough of these things. So, there are markets, but by no means would I ever tell anybody, like, if you want to go out and make your own, like, that's fantastic. That's not a threat to me at all.
Yeah,
on that. So, Pooch, are you going to put the SPL for the 3D printed parts up for grabs?
Yes, and we've been talking about this. Like, ultimately, I think the answer to that is going to be yes. One of the things we were trying to be mindful of was making it too easy for people to say, you know, hijack the design, because a lot of time and hours and effort has gone into this, even though it seems like a silly box. But at the end of the day, you know, I think a lot of the more, sourcing a lot of these components in a cost-effective manner isn't really going to be viable for a lot of people, and so we're leaning toward, like, let's just leave it out there. We're not going to release, say, the laser cut files and stuff like that, but I certainly want to make it convenient for any of my customers. So anybody that's bought the box, I will absolutely send the files to upon request, because a lot of times they want to print their own colors and change.
Well, that and replacements if we have breaks and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I guess, I'd be curious to hear Dave's ideas around this, because, you know, when you're trying to protect your IP a little bit, and if you're handing them the plans and making it too easy, you know, what are your feelings on that, Dave?
Well, I mean, it's amazing that the enclosures that I have released open source, they've all been copied by China. And so much so that they even copied, you know, my instruction sheet, and they still say buy printed solid when you go on AliExpress. Because I didn't even, you know, bear to try and actually read what they just translated.
Hey, free advertising though.
Pretty much. Other than I do get calls from people that have bought them and going, no, this is yours, and I go, no, it's not.
Yeah. So talk to E3D about that. They've. You know,
oh yeah, they have a similar problem. But here's the thing:
on a big scale.
When you do release it, you know, even the laser cut files, it's not so bad. Mainly because, yes, people could make a clone of it, but your box has a lot of additional hardware with it and a lot of stuff like that, which makes it really hard for someone else to sell at a competitive price.
Right.
I've seen your price. You have an impressive price for what you have there.
Yeah, maybe too impressive.
That's my biggest flaw with you. I think you priced lower than you should have.
Well,
you can make it. You can make it.
That's, you know what, that's a big challenge again in this space. Like I really, there was a psychological barrier that we both believe that when you cross $100 that you encounter, and we wanted it to at least the base model to be accessible. It is, and so we're trying to be mindful of the fact that, you know, we're born of rep and stuff too, and I want to be able to give back to the community. And I've mentioned before, like, we're actually releasing a 3D printable version for my 6-inch spools that you can actually print on a CR10. That's not out yet because we want to kind of keep the steam rolling on the main product first. But I feel like if you have a good idea, even if you patent it, even if you go to these lengths, it's going to get copied. And so you have to be, as a business, I feel like you have to be understanding that, accepting of it, and able to deal with it. And so if you don't have the money to, say, defend a patent, then it's probably not worth going after a patent. And there's probably arguments to say like there's nothing really patentable here. I would argue. Now I can trademark and I can make sure my brand is protected. But at the end of the day, I would rather focus my energy on making the best product I can, iterating, improving on it, and getting out in front as a market leader, and not worry about all the people that are going to clone it. That's flattering. That means it's a good idea. If you want to do it for cheaper, that's always going to be an issue, and it doesn't make sense for me to worry about it. That's my opinion.
And I'll tell you this. The customers that would buy the cloned one over the original one are not customers you want anyways.
Whoa.
You know?
That hurts.
I agree. Does it?
No, it doesn't.
You know, the ones that go out there and buy the clones are not the ones you want.
There are people who buy clones because clones are cheaper. So, I mean, we got to take into account the fact that there are people who do, buy the clone product just because of the price point, because they can't afford to, pay $100 for the
We're also not in a market like food or medical or housing or clothing or anything like that. This isn't exactly, well, for me it is, but for most normal humans, 3D printing isn't a necessity of life.
You're correct. You're correct.
So it's one of those, you don't have to buy clones if you really want to support the company.
But I will say this, though. I'll just ask the question. Have I been a reasonable contribution to the 3D printing community at this point?
You're asking the question?
Yeah, I mean...
I would say yes.
I'd say yes.
Okay, so I entered into 3D printing by buying a knockoff Prusa, cheap Chinese, off of Amazon, because I could not at the time justify or afford buying an actual Prusa or a Lulzbot or an Ultimaker or anything like that. Now, since I've gotten into the space, I have seen the benefit of going with higher grade machines and going with the brand versus going a knockoff. But again, the cost of entry at the very beginning for me, if that wasn't available to me at that time, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you guys today.
Well, I should probably clarify my statement, because you probably bought, like, let's say an ANET A8 or something like that.
Hicktop Prusa.
Hicktop Prusa, something like that. They're not really clones. They are cheaper versions. They're not trying to be a Prusa. They're not pretending to be a Prusa brand or anything like that.
Correct.
If I go on AliExpress and bought a rep box off of AliExpress tonight, then I'm kind of being an asshole.
Are they on there already? Man.
You know what I mean?
I get what you're saying.
A clone is when somebody tries to be the other company.
They still stole the Prusa name. So they still stole the Prusa i3. So Hicktop Prusa i3. That was the printer that I purchased.
Yeah, that's a terminology steal, and that's kind of a jerk move by them. But even the Prusa i3 then wasn't the Hicktop Prusa i3 in those days, or even back then. I wouldn't call, people knew they weren't buying an actual Prusa printer.
Oh yeah, yeah. I will say that is a definite thing that needs to be addressed, is the difference between, is this the legit product or not? Just like he talked about earlier with the E3D, E3D and the genuine E3D versus the clones. To the well-trained eye, it's easy to spot. To someone who just got into 3D printing, it's kind of a difficult, like, oh man, I don't know if this, it says E3D V6, but is it an E3D V6? I mean, it's all to like certain spots that you look and you go, oh yeah, well that's obviously a clone. But
well,
they shouldn't be selling it as
buying an E3D V6 clone and telling everyone it's an E3D. That'd be kind of a jerk move, and that'd be, if I was doing that to people, I feel like that's not the type of person I would want to deal with, is somebody going out there passing it off.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree.
So
if you're trying to pass off your clone as the legitimate, then that is a
That's the argument I was trying to make, is that you're trying to make it the actual legitimate. No, there's a place for clones. There's a place for knockoffs. There's a place for cheaper versions out there. I mean, heck, we just got shown a cheaper version of the rep box over there with the, Tupperware.
That was the cheaper version of the poly box. I'm not competing with rep box.
No, but the rep box was born of these things. I mean, those were around long before I ever.
Those were around first. So I mean, if anything, rep box is a clone of the the dry box,
the Tupperware,
the Walmart dry box.
See, and even that, though, I'd argue with that. Like, me showing that, what my point is, this is I want to make it myself. I have the capability at the time. And in my case, yes, I'm a cheap ass, and I didn't want to spend the money on a poly box or something like that. Plus,
but you made it yourself, so you get extra points.
I made it myself, yeah, so it's worth more. What I was saying with the Tupperware box is, like, this is the maker version of the poly box. What my intentions were, and Pooch, I think you took it the other way. It's not a comparison to the rep box. My biggest argument with the rep box versus any other filament storage / distribution system out there, I have yet to see a professionally made one that holds that many spools and does it actually that well. That would be my biggest argument about what Pooch and Travis are doing versus Polybox or the dry poly dry or whatever it is. The box that actually has a dehumidifier in it. Like, you guys are the only ones doing a distribution of that many spools that's not just one big long rod or something like that. And it hangs
and it hangs on the wall. Yeah, and you know what? We're well prepared that if it is a good enough idea and enough people are, it's gonna get copied, and we realize our time is short to come out in front, and so that's why there's been a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of attention maybe paid to some things, like not as much toward packaging when I'm working on product design and stuff still too. But when you're trying to be lean and mean, this is what happens. But anyway, it's funny though, because like I said, when I look at it, I've been looking at it long enough, and I feel like a child could reverse engineer this thing. So I'm not. I'm not about to. That's true. That may be true. If they could get it apart.
What you didn't realize is during this whole stream, Joe Mike keeps moving the camera out of the way, putting the camera back. What he's actually doing is taking close-up pictures of all of it so he can send it off to his Chinese distributor to get them up on AliExpress tomorrow.
Really?
There's actually an SD card, Wi-Fi SD card in this camera, so every time I take a picture, it's already in China. It's already there.
Wow, that's a hell of a Trojan horse you fed me right there, Joe Mike.
So tell me more about this lighting kit, Pooch.
I've said too much already.
If Pooch has anything to do with lighting, the lights that are in there, just hope he doesn't use those.
What, my little cheapo battery things from Amazon?
Yeah.
I threw that sign together in an hour, man.
I promise I'll have that upgraded by Earth.
So there was one thing that was mentioned in the chat that Danska talked about, the Kickstarter box. Did anybody mention?
Yes. Oh, that Kickstarter box.
I did hear about that today.
Storm Technology.
It's the one that has number one, it's on Kickstarter. Number two, the Kickstarter price is $369, I think.
For the base model.
The base model holds what, 4 spools?
Yeah, it looks like a little wine cooler.
Yeah, but it's got a dehumidifier or a heater in it or something like that.
Dehumidification.
Yeah, so it's got an active dehumidification system in it, which is neat. But I mean, given the fact that it's a Kickstarter for one, which we just love Kickstarters in the 3D printing community, and given the fact that it's $380 for the Kickstarter, who knows how much it's going to be at launch when they start selling it generally.
Well,
You know,
Okay.
so the interesting thing, so when that Kickstarter launched, I must have gotten at least 15 texts and DMs from various people. Oh, you got competition? Have you seen this? Have you seen that? And actually, Storm Technologies has been out. They were around before us. And if you look on the Kickstarter, I want to say it says something like it's version 6. Like they had a version of this thing that was like $700, $800. And as I understand it, they were basically taking. I think they were working backwards from an actual box that was a dehumidifier or something like that, and then they modded it and went from there. I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time reading up on it. That's not where I want to focus my attention. But as a Kickstarter, I don't quite get what they're going for because they were only trying to raise like $4,000, which isn't anything as far as what it takes to. Yeah, so unless it's a marketing play, I don't know, or they're just trying to get their money back on what they've spent to put it together. I don't know.
Okay, what's the name of this thing?
It's called the Spool Boss.
Got it.
Boss.
No.
You know what? They're using a Peltier cooler for their for the humidification.
they're using Peltier.
Yeah.
Interesting.
How is that going to work? That's not going to work.
Well, Peltier it can generate heat.
Yeah.
You can use Peltier as a heat transfer to dehumidify.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You're still warming the air in the box, but that seems like that would take forever.
Well, no. Look up Peltier dehumidifiers. It actually is a thing, but man, it's a energy hog.
Right.
And then they also claim they have a 100-watt heater inside, a 12-volt 100-watt heater in there to help dry out damaged filaments.
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, man.
You say 12 watt or 1200 watt?
12-watt 100 watt. 12-volt 100-watt.
100 watt. Okay.
So one of the pieces of feedback and questions that we get all the time is like, when are you going to put an active dehumidifier in it? When are you going to put a silicone mat in it or any of these things? And we've looked at, and I've tried personally, a lot of different things, but as a small business that can't afford a lawsuit, I am very, very anxious about taking anything electrical and integrating it in my box. Because the last thing I need is somebody burning their house down because they were trying to dehumidify their filament and having a lawsuit in their hand. So desiccant is a known entity and it's effective. And honestly, in my opinion, like short of if you're actively printing a ton of nylon all the time, maybe you've got a case for having an active dehumidifier in there. But I don't know. If you dry it out first, put it in there with some desiccant and keep it sealed.
You have to allow people to modify it. So if you put a couple secret holes on there, I do that on all my enclosures. Put a couple secret holes on there so that people that want to put a heater or light in there do it themselves, and it's all their fault. Yeah,
cable glands are your best friend. I've looked at that, and honestly, my plan is like, if you want to get this happens to work well, and maybe I can get a reseller thing, but I don't want to put the two together, at least not until I can afford to defend myself appropriately from frivolous lawsuits.
Pooch, if I can make a suggestion to that, I'd almost, like Joe Mike's doing your assembly video for you.
Guide. He already did the video. I'm doing the Duzuki.
What I was going to say is, maybe work with a content creator or something that they produce a video on how they lit their box. Then, it's just like any other DIY project that any of us feature on our channel. We list a list of materials that we use. You go out, you do it yourself. Nobody is responsible for it. This is just how I did it.
I know a guy.
And hey, that's great. But if I'm trying to run a business too, I'd like to be able to get some something off of endorsing a specific component of it too. So if I can find a way to kind of
I was thinking the liability side of things, because if you say use this to do it yourself, now you're the manufacturer telling them how to do it. Versus, I don't know that there's a huge difference between that and here's the the rep box with the electronics in it. You know what I mean? The liability side of it.
You know, most of my experience is maritime and bird law, so I can't speak well to that. But I would say you might have an argument. I don't know. But for now, we're not doing it for this reason.
I respect that. That's from
It
your
comes down to whoever pays the most for their lawyer would win that argument.
Exactly.
So just don't.
I don't want to find out.
Say it.
Yeah, and absolutely, I respect that from your side of things as a manufacturer. Not
allegedly, this works really well.
Yeah. Yeah, you could have, you know, somebody puts together. Somebody's going to put lights in their rep box. It probably will be Joe Mike first. He probably has the LED kit sitting there. But after he's done documenting, you know,
but does it turn on when the lid opens?
Yeah, it does actually.
Awesome. Then we need to talk.
You could, as the manufacturer, say spotlight it on your website, on your advertisements. Look what a rep box owner did to their box.
Yeah, like
not any directions.
In it.
This is what they did. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Mine will change color when I get a new subscriber.
Nice.
I like it.
You can endorse it. You just can't recommend it.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you just go, this is cool.
Yep, exactly.
I love what you did to your box. This is awesome. I'll show everybody.
Wait, but Pooch, aren't you going to tell people that they can use my method?
They can use your method to make it light up?
I'm just messing with you. Sure. All right, look, we got to do outros. We're like way overdue.
Sure.
All right, so I'll start from my left, and that's Dave. So tell them who you are, what you do, where we can find you.
Hey, David Randolph over at Printed Solid. You can find us at printedsolid.com. Twitter's Printed Solid. Facebook's Printed Solid. I think you get the general gist of how to find Printed Solid. One of the owners there. And, yeah, we have all the fun stuff.
That was fast. All right, man.
I try not to be a running commercial all the time.
Yeah, we appreciate your support, man. So one of the things, before I continue, one of the things when I attended Video Marketing World was Tim Schmoyer. If you don't know Tim Schmoyer, he's a YouTuber who runs video creators, tries to help other YouTubers jumpstart the game, learning from his mistakes and tips. So one of the things he talked about was companies who didn't do well in supporting the community. It's like you'd have a company like see a tweet from somebody like, "Hey, I really loved your product," and no response. Like, dude, the minimalist thing, all you had to do was like it. Well, Printed Solid, man, they're like right on. So they really support the community in that regard.
Love doing business with Printed Solid.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely a big supporter of your community. So thank you, Dave and Matt. It's awesome. You guys are winners. All right, moving on. Matt, you're next.
I'm Matt from How I Do It. I was trying to beat Dave. Real quick for the Friday night hangouts. The next hangout is Friday. I'm still in September. Sorry, October 12th. It'll be, I believe, 4 p.m. Eastern, 20 UTC, I believe. Yeah, 21 UTC now. They moved it up an hour, so it's a little bit later in the afternoon for those of us in the States. That's the EU stream, and the next US stream will be October 19th at 10 p.m. Eastern, 2 a.m. UTC, I believe that is. We're going to probably start converting over to just using UTC times, just to make it easy for everybody since we have the US stream.
That's not easy. That's not easy at all. I don't speak UTC.
Why do you think I always said Eastern?
I prefer GMT.
Isn't it the same thing?
Zulu time, baby.
Did you say JMT time?
JMT time is whenever I dang well please.
All right, so give us your outro there, JMT.
Oh, I'm Joe Mike, and I do YouTube videos at some point. I'll get back to them in this life. I've got a baby, so that explains a lot of what's me at the moment. I'm on Twitter. That's where I do most of my stuff now, is on Twitter. Mojike, Moejike. Mike Oscar Kilo Echo. Wait, nope, that's completely wrong. No, wait. Mike Oscar Echo Juliet India Kilo Echo. If we're going Zulu.
You call it from a walkie-talkie. You're an aviator. You're an aviator, I'd say.
Well, I'm a ham radio operator, actually, so
okay.
I know my native phonetics pretty well when I'm not incredibly overtired. But right now I'm doing the actual picture documentation for Pooch's rep box that I will hopefully get wrapped up this weekend and put on the official Duzuki. Duzuki.
And it is very appreciated. We are very thankful to have a professional doing these things for us.
Yeah.
He's regretting the trade.
Hopefully we'll get that up so people can actually build the daggum thing without scratching their head and losing a bunch of hair.
And the video helped.
The video did help a lot. Is there anything else I'm missing? Am I missing anything else?
Is that a burp cloth on your shoulder?
This? Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, it's just a rag. It's a cotton rag that I use to wipe off certain things like my hands or my head. But when wife hands me the baby, it magically turns into I don't get spit up on cloth.
It's just permanent.
So I'm just used to having something here now. So when I don't have something here now, it's like I'm naked. So this is my new like bandolier, I guess. My Chewbacca bandolier.
That's scary. You do that so well. All right, Pooch.
Yeah, I'm Pooch. I go by Repcord on all the interwebs. Like I said, I make boxes now. That's my idea. I do have a couple of other things I sell: cleaning kits, Filament, Find Me. Mostly on Twitter, I would say, is where I'm most active. But,
and you have a minor in packaging.
I have a minor in packaging and psychology and jackassery.
Well, you got a major in that.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard. The channel is Zidim, Zulu, India, Delta, India, Mike. And the easiest way to find out what I'm doing is I have to do it a lot. As people go, Zidim, huh? Except for one time I had a lady trying to write down Zulu, India. What's this? No, these are the letters. Zidim.com is the website. I'm back to going live as long as my voice hangs out on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock Pacific time. I have no idea what that is in Universal, but leave it at Pacific.
UTC minus
a whole bunch.
No, wait, no, it is minus 5.
We can see the smoke.
-7. UTC -7 right now during daylight savings time.
We will go with that number, but if you want to make it easy, just stay with Pacific time. My focus is trying to be around 3D printing for model trains, but I've ended up doing a lot of other stuff, and right now I got some folks clamoring for some game scenery, so working on that, as well as camera mounts and protecting my printers from my cat. So that's pretty much wraps it up for me.
Yeah, I'd like to point out one thing about your website, Richard. When I click on the Port Brennan Railroad link, it takes me to a 404.
Really?
Yeah, so that site looks like it's down. Wah.
All right, that's news.
All right, so I'm going to have to stop. So as the host, I have to pass the baton to somebody who's willing to take it. I have to wake up early, taking my son to SATs. He wants to become an engineer, and unfortunately, that's one of the requirements is to have SATs.
Well, bully on him.
No, hey, Tim, look at packaging, man. There's a lot of good money in packaging.
Well, he is going to go for mechanical engineering.
That's what I started out with.
So we'll see where that goes. He really wants to do music. So if anybody knows somebody or anything about music production, that's what he wants to do. And so whether he's goes to a school or takes a couple
Nashville.
Good. Well, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to write music. He wants to produce it.
I know. There's,
okay, that's what you're saying. Okay.
There's a couple of schools in Nashville that if you're wanting to go into production, they are the best in the nation. And I'm trying to remember the name of the one my buddy Joey went to. I'm blanking at the moment.
And then so we're wondering, is school really necessary? Can you just go to a couple conventions, network with people? So that,
to produce?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, is that like, what does he consider music production? Is he wanting to mix down, or is he just wanting to be the voice of, oh, we should do it this way? Or
yeah, I'm not sure about the details. We could talk more about that offline.
Yep.
I don't want to take up the channel with this. But thank you, everyone, for coming out and hanging out with us. Thank you for getting the ball rolling today, Matt. We'll try to, next time I agree to host, I'll try to be a little bit more on point.
No problem. Yeah, sorry to everybody for the delays tonight. That was my fault. But thank you, John, for stepping up and hosting and everything, and in my lack of effort this week.
So, well, no, it wasn't lack of effort. You were busy. So, who's taking the baton? So we have an official handoff.
I'm in control of it, so as long as I stick
around. It's you, man.
We'll keep on talking.
You didn't take it from me. You have to take it from me.
Dude.
Take it from me.
Eric.
What?
Why do you have an arm for the baton?
Oh, how'd you get that? I just had that here. All right. Thanks, everyone.
See you, John. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
The picture taking process is officially completed, Mr. P.
And they are now listed on AliExpress.
within 12 hours.
Oh no, they're already there. I'm looking right now. $59.99.
That's awesome. Good luck to them. You only have to wait 45 days, and it may or may not come with all the pieces.
So, okay, Pooch, I got to ask you a question.
Yeah.
I am on the checkout page right now for a custom side panel box. When do I submit graphics for the side panel?
You didn't read the little thing on the side there? It says, email me and I'll send you the template.
Oh, where's that at? I missed that.
Oh, it's on the left in the description. There's a lot of words. People don't like to read.
Okay. I didn't read
it. No, it's fine. One of these days, I'm actually just going to add a file upload field and just have there's no reason that the template shouldn't even be downloadable on there. So it's on the list.
That's what I was kind of looking for on the checkout. You gave me the description on the stream, so I didn't read the description.
Yeah, I mean, roughly speaking, it's 12 by 12 side, and unless you have a particularly specific design that needs to fit inside the contours.
Right.
But I can send you the template. It's not big.
I want custom panels for doing this.
I've been surprised how many people have been grabbing up custom panels. I wouldn't have thought that was that was Travis's excitement because he does a lot of that sign pressing.
Mine, I want to see how far I can go with my tubing. I want to mount mine on the wall and then run tubing. 2 of my printers are going in the next room over here shortly.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot, there's a lot more friction in PTFE than you might think over long runs.
Yeah, that's why I'm curious how far I can get before the stock extruders on the printers give me problems.
Yeah, if you have a geared extruder, it's not as bad. I definitely had some issues when I was trying to pull like my stock CR10 around a long run. It was grinding a little bit, but
after 3 to 5 feet, I bet you start to have issues.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm gonna have I'd have some bends in it. Now I was gonna do long.
Go Capricorn, dude. Long runs of Capricorn. That's not expensive at all.
Well, that's what I was looking at actually.
Or if you want to be slick, you drill out his holes and you put in 3 millimeter Bowden tubing so that it's got less friction inside.
We're selling that. We're selling that.
That's not an
actually 3.2. It's not up yet because there's I have 3 mil, which is like 1 millimeter wall thickness. Because basically I want to use that same pneumatic connector. But for 285, that's, in my opinion, it's a little too tight. It'll work on a short run, but they actually sell 3.2 inner diameter PTFE now. That's purposefully for 3D printing. And
that'll got 3 to 5 feet right there on 175 filament.
The problem is that it's that much less rigid, so it bends. So you have to be better about your cable management with that.
Yeah, it's easier to bend thinner diameter than it is thicker.
Exactly.
Yeah, the easier it is to kink it,
and that'll kill your friction right away. Any kind of kink in there is what'll get you.
Out of curiosity, Pooch, why not just up the rep box to that size? Because you're not.
Because right now we're such a small, I can't afford to have multiple SKUs of all these things. So I'm trying to find a way where I can capitalize on as much without having to redo design.
That's why I'm saying instead of having multiple SKUs, just have one that's the large diameter, because the diameter coming out of the rep box doesn't really matter.
So, I see what you're saying. So go instead of the PC4 M6, go to something like a PC5 or a PC like the thicker connectors.
Yeah, on all of them, rather than having different SKUs. Because if you think about it, it's going to the printer.
Yeah.
And like my dry box, it comes out, it's whatever, 4 inches, 6 inches of tubing right now. And then from there, it's an air gap, or like my Flash Forge, I actually use the tubes that are supposed to guide it from the back of the printer up to the top.
Yeah.
Those slip right over Capricorn tubing.
Yeah.
So they act as my guide to the the extruder. But
it's not a bad idea. I'd want to test it. The one thing that just jumps out at me is that when I'm looking at how it works with the MMU2 and the fact that it's creating a natural filament spring, I do wonder if you have the runs close enough together where a smaller tube could potentially enter the other tube, if that could cause problems. So I don't know. The answer is because I had a whole bunch of 2x4 PTFE originally that I wanted to sell, but you may be right. I don't know. So I've got the 3 millimeter. I've been playing with all the different diameters. Bigger may be better. The other thing is if we're trying to protect against air incursion, having less gap depending on. I mean, that's negligible at length, but if you're just using a short run of it, then you got a bunch of holes in the box.
That's a good answer. As you were talking about that, it made me think one size coming out being larger would accommodate all. But that is a good point. Everything you just said makes sense.
Yeah. And again, it's I don't have the science on how much that's going to matter and how many holes it's going to take before you're going to really start to, lose your sealed environment. It's not sealed, but you know what I mean. Yeah. And it got quiet. Is this a sign?
Now I'm thinking. You got me thinking about my whole idea with the rep box as to how to make it work.
Thinking about my life choices.
That's what I was thinking about
Hey, I don't mean for this to take over as some sort of promotional video. It's been a fun project for sure and a good product. So I love talking about it, but I don't want to take over.
You know what? I have no problem with the promotional side of things on the stream. Certain cases, companies, yourself included, Printed Solid included. I really don't care if you guys rep your stuff, because yous are part of this community. Yous are supporters of this community. You're not just a company trying to shove crap down our throat.
Well, thank you. Yes, most certainly. Chris just brought up an interesting thing. The size does matter on that if you're trying to go directly from the box into a print head. I've only done that a handful of times, and what I've found is that's great for the ones that are right next to the box, Chris. When you start getting further away, those long runs, the friction adds up a lot. So without some sort of boost on your extruder pull, that becomes an issue.
Tony Ryan has a good suggestion, and I'll pay for this if you do it, Pooch.
What is it? Oh, glitter?
They're Mike's side panels.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, we got to do that. That'd be awesome.
Really?
I'll pay for it. But the box
you've just given it away now, guys. Like, you realize that anything I send to Joe Mike now, he's not going to open it now.
If I get glitter on my side panels, I'm setting the whole box on fire.
Hey, any publicity is good publicity, man.
I ain't filming it. I'm just setting it on fire.
You're not going to get your knot of flamethrower? You're not going to Barnacles it?
Oh, yeah. I'm one of the people that was lucky enough to get a knot of flamethrower.
I'm so mad, man. I was actually on the site, and I was like, man, this is tempting, but for, what were they, 500 at the time? And now on eBay, they're like, people are selling for like $2,000.
Which still is not a bad price considering that the run is done.
It's a freaking roofing torch, man. That's like
it's a roofing torch and a Nerf gun. Somebody found the gun that it's actually.
I love it because it's got a magwell in it. Yeah. So like, why does it happen? Because they just grabbed the frame off.
Yeah, that was Barnacles. It actually has the name of the manufacturer of the rifle itself right on it. Still, they didn't even like file it off.
No, I mean, it was never intended to be anything other than like one of their little fundraising projects.
Yeah, it was a publicity thing.
But it's an Elon Musk product, so I mean, it's almost that's the selling point versus just getting a roof torch and or building your own. You know, this is the one that Elon Musk was like, "Hey, this isn't a flamethrower, buy it."
It says it right there, not a flamethrower.
This one is assembled and good to go. I don't have any drywall. Well, I lied. It's behind me. There's drywall behind me. I don't know.
Hang it way high.
Huh?
You gotta hang it way up high, huh?
Well, this one is actually going to hang above on wood paneling, but I'm not sure if I want to document the hanging process. As far as pictures, I can just kind of say,
yeah.
You know, write it out. Hey, put the French cleat this way, and then kind of just set it on there.
Do an illustration of it.
Oh yeah, are you doing hand-drawn illustrations too, Joe Mike? Do you do that?
I figured I would do some quick videos that are those sped up whiteboard drawings.
Oh yeah, those are awesome. Yeah.
You know, like the UPS commercials used to do.
Yeah, the UPS commercials. Do some Venn diagrams, and yeah, it'd be awesome. Sounds great.
What can Brown do for you?
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna call it a night, guys.
Yeah. I gotta get my kids to bed. Or if you guys are gonna stay and hang out, I'll come back. But I'm sure they've destroyed the house by now. There's no smoke coming out the door.
I think I'm gonna actually call it a night too, and start on the actual written documentation tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm loving the haircut, by the way, buddy. It's looking good.
Mine?
Yeah, it's nice. Going short.
We compliment his hair, but when I do, everyone insults my lack of hair.
I complimented it. I didn't not compliment it.
It looks like his hair.
High and tight. No, it's not exactly.
High and tight mil spec cut.
No.
I call
I'm
it
just-
the
I
don't
shave
wanna
my
do
beard
crap
off.
when I wake up cut.
I'm just jealous because I can't grow it, Dave. You know, like that's it. I don't have the
Last time I
option.
shaved mine off, I walked into the library and a couple of people screamed, "Grow it back! Grow it back!" Thanks for the support.
The sad thing is, you know why I always only grow the goatee?
Mm.
Shaving efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
This is real easy. This is real easy. This is where all the problems are.
Yeah. Broad strokes.
Never
Broad strokes.
fast. You're technical.
I started with a goatee. I've had a goatee basically since I could grow facial hair. And Jen said one time, because in the winter and stuff, I wouldn't shave through the winter. I'd let it get scruffy and let it grow kind of a scruffy ass beard. And one time Jen said, don't shave it off. She wanted me to keep it. So I kept it. Now I threaten that if she doesn't let me buy a 3D printer when I want a printer, I'm going to shave it off.
That is about the weirdest thing I've heard in a while.
I don't actually do that. But I do threaten to shave it off from time to time.
All right, guys, I'm jumping off.
Okay.
Have a
Me
good
too.
night.
Good night. Good night, all.
See you night.
I think we're going to wrap it up. Let's see. Just to reiterate again, the next stream is this coming Friday, the EU stream at on the 12th, and the following US stream will be the 19th, all on this channel here. So we'll see you guys then. Thanks everybody, and thanks to all the thanks to John for hosting, and thanks to all the co-hosts.